Thank you, Mrs. Harland. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Robert Hutchings. I'll be chairing the hearing today. I'm joined on the panel by Mr. Jerry Arnell and Ms. Linda McFadden. Our assessor today representing the assessment department, City of Winnipeg, is Mr. Kem Wong, and our secretary is Mrs. Crystal Harlan. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Border Revision YouTube channel, for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave this meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questioning by the assessor and the panel. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on the evidence presented here today. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Today, we will be hearing item 1 on our docket. Mrs. Harlan, please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, would you please state your full name?
Kem Wong.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Applicant, would you please state your full name?
Sarah Cates.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Harlan. Welcome to the assessor and the applicant. First item on the docket today is item number 1, file number 24-1307, roll number 120229-77-100. Address is 859 Grosvenor Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2025 realty assessment appeal. To both parties, Mr. Wong, any preliminary issues?
No.
Ms. Cates?
No, I'm good as well. Thank you.
Does either party have rebuttal to submit?
No. Thank you.
Ms. Cates?
I have just some brief rebuttal. I won't spend long on it.
Okay. Has it been submitted in writing or is it going to be verbal?
It had been submitted to the secretary.
Okay. Mrs. Harlan, do we have that on our SharePoint?
No, I can do that now, or
While we're going along with mine, yeah.
would you like to do it now?
No, you know what? If you could do it while we're going through the hearing, because we'll deal with the rebuttal at the end of both presentations.
All right then.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wong, when you're ready, please, 859 Grosvenor Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Did you want me to go through the file number and the roll number assessment?
For the record.
Okay, the subject property is 859 Grosvenor Avenue. The file number is 24-1307. The roll number is 120-229-77100. The roll year is 2025, and the assessed value is 5,912,000. This is a residential apartment. It's 3 stories high. It was built in 1928, but we have an effective year built of 1964 because it's been fully renovated. There are 41 suites with 21 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 is the sales history for the subject property. The property sold in 2019 for $7 million, over $1 million higher than the current assessed value. On page 3 is a picture of the subject property with its location. On page 4 is a description of the property with some interior pictures. On page 5 is our income valuation summary. We used average rents of $1,170 to get a potential income of $575,000. We used a 3.2% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $557,000. And we used a 44% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $247,000, capped at 5.25%. We have an estimated market value of $5,911,000, or about $144,000 per unit. On page 6 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've applied are in line with what's in the market. On page 7 and 8 is information on how we derived our cap rates, with some cap rate sales that range from 3.46 to 5.74%. All the cap rates in the chart were stabilized, had their net operating income stabilized over 3 years prior to the 3 years prior to the sale. And so yeah, every cap rate on there has been stabilized 3 years. On page 10 and 11 is the income statement supplied by the owner. The net operating income is about $330,000, which is about 20,000 higher than what the model has estimated at 310,000. So I feel that the model's net operating income is well supported. So to conclude, the model's net operating income of about 310,000 is supported by their actual net operating income of about 330,000. The model cap rate is supported by some market sales, and the assessed value at $5,912,000 is supported by the subject sale at $7 million. So having said that, I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $5,912,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Cates, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes, thank you. So on your page 1 with the effective age, would that effective age be the result of like the assessment of someone in the department, kind of a subjective adjustment?
Yeah, the effective age is subjective to one of my colleagues or myself reviewing the property.
Okay, and then the effective age would be what the model inputs on page 5 would be based on?
It would be based on one of our assessors' reviews of the property.
Sorry, to rephrase, like the modeled workup on page 5, that would be based on the effective age rather than the actual age?
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of your cap rate sales on page 8, do you have the workups or just the final values?
We just have the final cap rate, which is based off of net operating incomes that have been stabilized over 3 years prior to the year of the sale.
Okay. And then for the subject sale, would you agree that one sale doesn't necessarily make the whole market?
No, it doesn't, but I feel it does give you a bit of an idea.
Okay. Thank you. That would conclude my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Ms. McFadden, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, my only question, any comments on the validity of the 2019 sale? Was it arm's length?
As far as I can tell, it was, and I think it was actually publicly listed in terms of a news article that indicated that this is what the property sold for. So, yeah, I feel it is, as far as I know, it is an arm's length and it is a market sale.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question. Ms. Cates, bear with us for 1 second while we pull up your brief, please. Ms. Cates, when you're ready, please, 859 Grosvenor Avenue.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $5,592,000. On page 6, we have the property site maps. So an aerial map view and then a Google map view showing the location. And then some exterior photos on page 7. Property description on page 8. So the subject is on the north side of Grosvenor between Wentworth and Ruskin in the Crescentwood area. It is a 3.5-story building built in 1920s with an effective age of 1964. There are 41 units. If you move to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach. So we are applying potential market gross rents of $546,170 or $1,110 per unit per month. We are applying a market vacancy of 3.2% and expenses of $229,523 or 41.7% of EGI based on a stabilization of the expenses. On page 14, we have our cap rate for the subject property. So we are applying a cap rate of 5.75% using the effective age, but still noting that the structure of the property was from the 1920s. We'd note that the condition is good as it's a renovated property. So we've not done any further adjustments to the cap rate. On page 16, we have our income and expense breakdown. So you could see our net operating income of $321,534 with a 5.75% cap rate gives an indicated value of $5,592,000 rounded. In regard to the sale, it is always a factor to consider in terms of valuing a subject. But given that the sale is like a few years out from the reference period we're looking at, we've done a valuation consistent with how we would do other apartment valuations, just as another means for the board to refer to. Sometimes what happens with these sales is things that they assumed at the time regarding net operating income or cap rate aren't always realized. So that's what we've provided here on page 16. On page 17, we have our repair and maintenance breakdown. So the repair and maintenance at $703 per unit would be considered low, but that's because it's been renovated. So when properties have been renovated, they have what's referred to as a repair and maintenance holidays. There will be less items for them to fix, but we would expect that number to increase over time, likely to something in the range of probably 1,500 to 1,800 at least. And then we have our appendix starting on page 19. I've just included some marketing photos that were available, as well as the financials that we've looked at. And then I've also submitted our standalone cap rate study, which just talks about our overview for how we look at cap rates, looking to market information, as well as looking at the cap rate ranges from the city. And then we have our own cap rate calculations in there. So that's all there for your review. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Wong, any questions of the applicant?
No questions. Thank you.
You? Mr. Arnell, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, thanks.
Ms. McFadden, any questions?
Just one question. Ms. Cates, do you know whether or not when the upgrades were done to the suite, these appear to have been somewhat more than just cosmetic changes? They, for example, the marketing mentions a heat air exchanger, for example. So it sounds as though they'd actually updated the systems of the building. I'm inclined to think that that amount of renovation would have required upgrades to bring the building up to today's fire standards, et cetera, that kind of thing. Do you know that?
So we had a note in our files that said the property had undergone renovations around 2011. So that would be when the bulk of the upgrades were done. And in terms of your comment about upgrading systems, that completely makes sense given how old the building was from the 1920s. Definitely makes sense. You'd have to upgrade those things over time
Right.
to keep up with current living standards.
Correct. So this building would be in much better condition than the normal 1928 building, a building that's been built in the 1920s. It's been upgraded, correct?
Yes, definitely. That's why we are not disputing the effective age. I would say, yeah, effective age that the city has in the 60s. That's what we've used in the analysis. That would make more sense than sticking with the original age of 1928.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fadden. Excuse me, Ms. Cates, would you mind going to your page 20 and going through these photos or looking at these photos? You've got them tagged as marketing photos. Would you know when these were taken?
I wouldn't. These were just what was available on the website, but I would imagine that they're somewhat current, but I don't have an exact date. Sorry about that.
No, I apologize. What I should ask is, do these photos reflect the current physical condition of the subject property?
I would assume so, because these photos look representative of renovated units. So I would assume that this would be pretty reflective of what the units look like, but I haven't actually been to the property to inspect in
Okay.
order to confirm that.
Okay. All right. And it would appear it's got electric baseboard heat, and yet the marketing says something about fresh air, modern fresh air air exchange system put in there. Would that be just in the hallways, or would it be in the individual suites? Would you know that?
I wouldn't know for certain. I would assume it would be referring to more the common area, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to 100% confirm.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. All right. That is my only question. And Ms. Cates, you would have rebuttal evidence to submit?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Harlan, were we able to update the SharePoint?
Yes.
Okay.
So it should be in your SharePoint folder. If you can't find it, refresh. And I've also sent it, Mr. Chair, to the assessor.
Okay.
By
Okay.
What's it tagged at? Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay, I have it now. Apologize. Mrs. Cates, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 4, just to briefly go through the rebuttal, we just start by looking at city's cap rates for 727 Sargent and 241 Young. These cap rates at 3.46%, 4.21% are unusually low for multifamily properties in the Winnipeg market. And without seeing an income approach or the supporting data, we would have to suggest using caution with these type of cap rates, as typically when we see cap rates this low, it points to the purchaser potentially purchasing a different income opportunity. And then in the pages to follow, so for 459 Sargent, on page 7, 150 Hendon, we've taken a look at the city's cap rates, and based on our own market research, interviews with purchasers, we were able to restabilize those cap rates. So for 459 Sargent, we've restabilized at a 5.79 and 150 Hendon at a 5.42%. Then on page 22, we just note for 677 Maryland, the city is using the older sale. There is a sale leading right up to the reference date. And our calculation of that is at 7.11%. And that would conclude my rebuttal presentation, and all the supporting documentation is in there for your further review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cates. Ms. Cates, pardon me. Excuse me. Mr. Wong, any questions of the rebuttal evidence submitted?
No, thank you.
Any comments?
I guess just that, like I said, in my presentation with regards to our cap rates, we used the 3 years income and expenses prior to the year of the sale, and so we feel that it's been stabilized correctly, and it has and the lower cap rates are consistent with some of the appraisals that I've seen, where properties that produce lower net operating incomes, they actually are valued using cap rates that are lower in the 3 and 4% range. So it does seem to be, I guess, those lower cap rates are what we see, and those lower cap rates are like I said, I've seen in other appraisals. And the thing is, when you use these lower cap rates to try to value a property, they usually result in estimates of value that are fairly representative of market. And so I feel that the cap rates that we presented are reasonable, and they result in accurate estimates of value.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. McFadden, any questions on the rebuttal presented by the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. Any requirement for summary? Mr. Wong?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cates?
Good as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that we have heard all items on the docket today, and we will conclude the hearing. Thank you for both appearing, and you'll hear from us as soon as possible. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Harland, if you could put us in camera, please.
Yes. Just a moment, please, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, we're good. I will be right back. Take us offline.